Here's a question a lot of car guys ask themselves. Should you spend more on your car than what it's originally worth? Whether we like it or not, cars are a depreciating asset, and all the money that you spend on mods will never increase the value quickly enough to outfight its depreciating worth. Unless it's a classic car, but for the sake of this video, we're not going to talk about classic cars. Just think of regular modern performance cars that you and me and most people would think about buying. So first and foremost, let's address the elephant in the room. Can money buy happiness? And personally, I always hated this question because everyone always cops out by saying, of course it doesn't. That's like one of the biggest lies that people tell themselves, because in my opinion, that's kind of BS to an extent. I will say this right now. Money alone won't make you happy. I repeat, money by itself does not magically make you happy. It will not cure chronic depression. However, let's be real, you can buy something that makes you happy. So if you're a skateboarder, a new skateboard will probably make you pretty happy, even though your old one is always, it's pretty nice, it's gonna break someday, you'd prefer a new setup. It's the same with cars. So to an extent, money can make you happy. Now the question is, how much is our happiness worth? $5,000, $10,000, or even $100,000? Is our happiness even measurable? The short answer, yes. The long answer is that it's different in how it's measured for everyone. Let me elaborate. So let's say you buy an Eclipse for $5,000 and then you spend $6,000 on mods for it. So let's evaluate this situation. First and foremost, you've spent more on the car than what it's worth. It's definitely lost value from a money standpoint because you've put more miles on it. There's no way that the car is probably worth more than $5,000, especially if you kept it for 15 years, because that's just how depreciation works. And let's say it took you 3 years to get the full build finished. That's a lie. As car enthusiasts, there's no such thing as a finished build, but you get the joke. Just for this example, we'll say it's a fully finished build. It took you 3 years, and then you kept the car for 15 years. And most cars after 10 to 15 years lose a lot of their value regardless of whether they were modded or not. For example, you look at old Corvettes, Eclipses, Subis, Mustangs, etc. They're so dirt cheap anyways, whether they're modded or not, it really doesn't matter at that point. Now it's a matter of, did you get the amount of happiness within the 10 to 15 years of ownership that offsets the costs of the mods and the price of the car? Let's just say you had a bone stock Eclipse for those 15 years instead. Would you have gotten the same amount of happiness that $6,000 worth of mods gave you? And most people would say no, they wouldn't. They would rather spend $6,000 on a $5,000 Eclipse if it means having a car that they're happy for 15 years. And truth be told, 15 years of thorough enjoyment, that's a long time, and that's a hard to beat length, especially in regards to enjoyment that comes from items. And again, I'll say it, of course the car and the money doesn't magically make you happy, nor will modding it, especially to a non-car person. However, to someone who's passionate about cars and enjoys upgrading, and it also enjoys the interactions that comes with upgrading, as well as talking to people, making these purchases, that will make you happy. And what I mean by that is, it's rather arbitrary, but you know what I mean. The enjoyment of modding could come from showing it off to your friends, or really just sometimes even showing it off to yourself, just if it makes you satisfied knowing that you can now hear a cool exhaust system, if that makes you happy, or if that intake really made you happy, or getting that new tune really just made you feel like you're getting closer to the build that you want. And that feeling of closeness, that feeling of completion does provide happiness, and then you can show it to your friends, like I said, and you can make memories with your friends, whether that's going to car meets, hooning about with them, and that in itself will also make you happy. In that sense, it's hard to say that $6,000 was even that much. If anything, that was a great deal. And even if we up the ante, let's say you bought like a used $27,000 Mustang GT, and then you dumped like another $10,000 on mods on it, or you even did a full, I don't know, somehow you spent more money than the car's worth. You spent $28,000 on mods. Boy, oh boy, will that be one fully built Mustang GT, and it probably will put a smile on your face more than spending that $28,000 elsewhere would have. And that's really where the question comes from, is when you think about where else you could have spent that money to get that amount of happiness, that's going to differ from person to person, especially for non-car people. And now that we know that modded cars can bring you happiness, especially, I guess, from a non-car person even watching this video, you can probably see why we do those things, why we spend more money on our car than it's worth. Because like I told you, it could give us 15 years of happiness, to which offsets the cost. We don't care about that. Happiness is priceless sometimes. Sometimes, I say, because sometimes the prices do get pretty high. let's address something else, which is supercars. So for supercars, you don't really mod them, and on top of that, they're extremely expensive. For supercars, it's very hard for them to outfight their depreciation in their ability to give you happiness. If you're an extremely materialistic person, again, buying something like a Lamborghini is not automatically going to make you happy. And even if you aren't a materialistic person, you may not need the Lamborghini for something like 100 grand plus. So I'm talking about regular supercars like Gallardos, McLaren MP412s, not the Ferrari Enzo. I know someone's going to talk about like, oh, well, the Ferrari Enzo is gaining $1 million in value. Like, no, okay, not appreciating supercars. Let's be real. The average person cannot predict which supercars are going to appreciate in the next 15 years, nor could they get hold of them anyway, since most appreciating supercars are on waiting lists anyways. So we're just talking regular bog standard cars like the Ferrari 360, Lamborghini Gallardo, and the McLaren MP412. Those cars have depreciated. You can't deny that. They have lost their value. Even if you buy one used, they will likely continue to drop in value. Maybe slower now since they lost most of their value the first 3 to 5 years, but every mile you put on that is going to make the car hemorrhage several thousands of dollars. They're not like your ordinary cars where it's easier for them to outfight the amount of depreciation. Like I said, even the Mustang example, for a supercar, you're at least in the 100 grand range, and that's a lot harder to justify. So the main thing I want to talk about is something that everyone brings up in this, which is the supercar versus house argument. A question that every car enthusiast with money in their 20s and 30s has likely pondered, including myself. Everyone comes through the decision of, should I just buy a supercar or should I buy a house instead? And a lot of people are going to tell you to buy the house because it's an appreciating asset, and that peace of mind alone is worth more than any amount of happiness a supercar could give you. I would disagree with that. A house is a bigger pitfall than most people realize, and unfortunately, you can find more videos informing people of that nowadays because the housing market has changed a lot, and houses in general have just changed a lot from when our parents were around, because your parents are probably the biggest advocate, because when you're in your 20s and 30s, your parents will probably tell you to buy a house because that's what they grew up with. But it's a lot harder to buy a house in today's market, and they're a lot more expensive now, especially in certain areas of the world. So from personal experience, I would say that I highly regret the decision I've made because I'd rather have a Lamborghini Murcielago Super Veloce that would just roar across the cornfields of Indiana rather than being stuck in the humidity of Atlanta. Don't get me wrong, I love the city of Atlanta, but let's talk about the first downside of a house. It's a serious commitment. And most importantly, the phrase that a lot of people always say, you can't drive a house. And boy, are they damn right. Like I said, there's serious commitment. You're stuck there for several decades possibly. You can't just run away from mortgage payments. You can't just up and go. I mean, you could, but let's be real, you really shouldn't. The reality is, they come with a lot of sacrifices, more than a supercar, especially to a car enthusiast who would be much better off not dealing with it. Apologies if I have a lisp or if I'm talking over this video, it's the medicine I'm on. Anyways, even if you don't like the supercar as much as you thought you did, they're easier to get rid of than a house. Within a year, it's not going to lose too much value, and you're going to find out whether or not you like it or not in a year. Trust me, you might even know before that. And selling a supercar is still somewhat hard, but trust me, it's much easier than a house. You can get it off your hands within months to half a year. Houses are a lot more trouble than people think because of maintenance, repairs, water bills, electricity bills, other general utility bills, and a lot more other aspects that can cause it to hemorrhage money, and a lot more other renovations as well. They are not just instantly appreciating assets. I really hate that argument. Even aside from the house versus supercar argument, just in the general argument, if you had 150 grand right now, here's something I want to preach. Houses aren't necessarily an investment. The housing market changes. If you have 150 grand, it'd probably be smarter to spend that 150 grand on a true investment, whether that's starting a business or doing something you're passionate about, like maybe pursuing a better degree, like to help further your future, something to better yourself. Or even if you just do the traditional play of the stock market type of investment, you could do that too. And you'll probably make more money that way than you would on waiting like 10 or so years for your house to appreciate 20 grand. Like you spend, like let's say you bought a 300 grand house and then you wait 10 years, it only goes up by 20 grand. And that's assuming it goes up because it probably won't. And that's assuming you offset the costs you spent in the house. Like maybe you spent 25 grand renovating it and fixing all the previous damage the previous owner did. In that case, you're actually down 5 grand. And like I said, that money can be better spent elsewhere. And with the supercar situation, you could probably spend 100 grand on investments and 50 grand on a down payment on, like I said, a Gallardo or MP412 or something like that. And now you get the happiness of the supercar, and you get the potential of making more money than what the house would have got you from an appreciating asset. And then you can use that money to buy a house later. Ooh, what do you know? In short, don't rush yourself to buy a house, and really you don't even have to make that decision. Really, it's not something people exaggerate on what you need. And if you're a purebred car enthusiast who just wants a supercar and you've been dead set on getting a supercar since you were a kid, I salute you, because really, without people like you, we wouldn't have supercars in the first place. People have to be crazy enough to buy supercars for supercars to even be a thing in the first place. So again, I salute you if you're just rolling your eyes this whole time like, Bladed, I'm gonna take the supercar over the house without even thinking about it because heard or a supercar. You know what? Having said that though, that's the note I want to end on. What do you all think? Is happiness worth spending more money on your car than its value? And then the second question is, would you rather have a house or supercar? Let me know in the comments below. Other than that though, thanks for watching and see y'all next time. Blade Angel out.